Hi everyone, it's just Dr. Andrew Orr here. I wanted to come on today to talk about a subject that I've talked about before, and I know that every time we mention it, it it does trigger people a little bit, and I can see why. And the actual topic is about research versus searching, because what we see is a lot of people say, "I'll go and research, and I've researched my condition and done things like that." But I want to come on and talk about the difference between research and actually a Google search, and how what I'm trying to get people to know about is there's a big difference between research and searching, and that a lot of the searching that we get on Google can be a lot of misinformation. And that's why I brought my daughter Julia on, because she actually is a scientist, and to talk about the research side of it so people understand. Because recently I put up a post about endometriosis, right? And that your endometriosis signs and symptoms could actually be pelvic floor hypertonus. It could be adenomyosis. It could be, you could have a full bowel, meaning that you're constipated, or it could be interstitial cystitis. Now, without properly seeing a proper specialist that can use differential diagnosis, if you Google searched the symptoms for interstitial cystitis, pelvic floor hypertonus, and endometriosis and adenomyosis, you'll come up with exactly the same symptoms. So it's about having someone know what they're talking about. And that's what I'm trying to get through to people, because you can't manage a disease yourself, just like I can't. I've shared with people I've recently had surgery, and Julia's recently had surgery herself this year for a gynae condition. And you just can't, because if you're sitting at home doing nothing, or say you've researched or what you think is research, or you've searched, but then what do you do with that information? Because if you need medication, you need surgery, you need all that, you can't do that yourself, right? So that's why we're big on trying to get people to get the right advice, see the right people, and yes, be educated. We want people to be educated. So I know people take it the wrong way as soon as they see this research versus search. But even just recently, Julia's just saying she's found out that her thyroid is low. So she's gone and Googled the symptoms of thyroid, or hyper and hypothyroidism. It's basically told her to stop eating all these different foods, and basically it'd make her not eat anything. So that's not good either. And there's a lot of misinformation. And I'll pass that over to Julia about the difference. So what is the difference between research and a Google search? Let's hear it from the scientists, because I know what it is, but let's hear it from you. You can put it into a layperson's.
To put it simply, if I go on to Google and search for something, anyone can be writing anything on Google, even if it looks like a really polished up website that looks like it has credible information. Unless that specific article or blog or whatever has been peer reviewed, you don't want to trust it. Anyone can write anything and make it look nice and pretty and convincing, but it may not necessarily be correct, which is quite dangerous, because you get people that genuinely want to know more about a condition or be educated about a specific topic, but they may be getting misinformed. With a Google search, you just run the dangers of facing things that are incorrect or not quite right. People might be on the right pathway, but have a few things muddled up. When it comes to research is not easy. To put it simply, throughout my entire degree, I've done 2 or 3 subjects which are purely dedicated to just learning how to interpret research. And they're considered some of the hardest subjects. With research, you want to make sure that it's coming from a credible source, that the article you're reading has been peer reviewed. And even if you do come across a peer-reviewed journal article, a lot of the time, unless you've been trained to interpret the data, you're not going to know what's going on, because an abstract isn't necessarily indicative of what's going on in the entire article. So for example, I've had to learn how to perform a statistical analysis so that I'm able to interpret the data, look at the p-values. research is a lot more thorough. It's usually from credible sources who have spent years and years and years researching themselves and then writing up an article based on their findings. So I would trust that any day over just a random website off the internet from someone who's either written their own anecdotal evidence or, you know, have just done some Google searching themselves and have written up a blog. So that's, I guess, my interpretation of it. One's more thorough than the other. One is definitely more accurate than the other. Yeah.
And statistical analysis is really, really hard. And I know when I did my master's and had to learn, like my professors were, they were so adamant you had to know your stuff. And it was probably one of the hardest subjects I've learned, learning difference between confidence intervals, P-scores, Z-scores, T-scores, bell curves, and what they all mean. And, you know, like, if you don't know the terms like null hypothesis and things like that, you're not going to understand what good research is. And we talked about, you just talked about it before, and we're talking about the other thing is a lot of people have comorbidities together, like they've got so many things going on and they might not have realized that they have them. So that's where differential diagnosis comes in. But then we talk about that we can also make any data sound great, right? We were just talking today about the correlation between eating ice creams and drowning incidents.
I made a graph. So I remember in my first statistics class, the first lecture we had, our lecturer pulled up a graph that showed a positive correlation between ice cream consumption and drownings. Now, obviously, we know that ice cream consumption does not cause drownings. But if you look at a graph like this that shows a positive correlation between two factors, a lot of people jump to the conclusion that, oh, X must be causing Y. So in this case, ice cream consumption would be causing drownings, but that's not the case. So it's good to know that correlation does not imply causation. So if you feel like, for example, a good example is me. The last couple of weeks, I was having dizzy spells. I felt tired and sluggish, and I was convinced that my iron levels had dropped again. And I was worried I was, anemic, and I was stressing out about it for the last couple of weeks, going, all these symptoms must mean that I'm anemic. But I went to go get testing, and it's not my iron levels at all. It's something entirely different. So just because there's a correlation, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the cause.
And if you Googled your symptoms,
your
symptoms, it would say iron deficiency, or like most of the time you've got cancer and you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And we know that even through research that 75 to 80% of the stuff that we get off Google is actually wrong or incorrect. The other part is that people don't realise that when you publish research and it goes free to the public, it means it's either crap research or it is now past the value date. It's been outdated. So now we can put it out to free public. So a lot of the research public get is free. And you're right about PubMed. The problem with abstracts is it has this fancy title that says, ice cream is related to drownings, and you read it, but if you go through to the whole end, it's saying, well, there could be, but we need more research on this. And the thing is, on a hot day, people are going to go swimming more, and guess what they'll buy on the way home from the beach? They'll get an ice cream, or they'll get it before they go to the beach. And so you can see where the correlation comes from. Or I saw one recently with eggs causing diabetes. So the only common factor that everyone had was that they ate eggs, but it couldn't have been all the chocolate they ate or the cans of Coke that they were drinking. And because they all didn't drink Coke or they all didn't drink this, but hang on, they all ate eggs. It's eggs. That's what did it. And this is the problem.
That sounds like a shocking study.
Yeah, it was. The study was poo-hooed by the peers, and it's terrible. But that's the problem with things. The general public don't know how to understand this. So
not always.
1 in 10 people might get it right. They might Google their symptoms and they might get it right. But what do you do with that data there? What do you do with that research? Because like you're feeling like you've got iron, but how did you find out that you weren't iron deficient? You went and saw a specialist who wrote you a pathology slip, then you found out what it is. Or if you need surgery, well, you can't do surgery on your own. And sitting at home taking painkillers and a tablet is not managing your symptom. It's not managing your disease. You're managing pain. That's it.
It's a Band-Aid
It's a
fix.
Band-Aid approach.
It's not actually fixing the root of the cause of the problem. It's just slapping a Band-Aid on it going, okay, it's, my symptoms are gone for the meantime. And, I was guilty of doing that for the longest time, going, no, I can push through. And I can see why people do it. It's, it's a big commitment to make in terms of surgery, but sometimes you've just got to put yourself first and go, no, like, I can't do this myself. I do need the help.
And it's hard. It's hard for some people because the demographics are limiting. But the other thing people need to know when they say, oh, I went to my doctor and they're Googling as well. If your doctor's Googling, you need to see a new doctor. And when I say to people too, if you've got gynecological conditions for a start, you shouldn't just be seeing your GP. And this isn't a slight on GPs at all. You need a good GP. Nothing wrong with GPs. GPs do an incredible job. But we have a specialist for a reason because they specialise in a certain area. Unfortunately, with medicine, it generally means they're boxed in. That's all they do. They don't do multimodality stuff. Like we were explaining this morning to Julia, said, I went to my immunologist. Well, how come they didn't pick up this? Like, they're an immunologist. That's not their area. So
sadly,
so we don't see that. So, but going to your GP just for gyno issues isn't going to help you with the gyno issue, because a lot of the time, the last time they learned gynecology was back in college, and it was the one subject they did back in college. So you have to see a specialist. And again, it's not a slight on GPs, but we're trying to get people to understand that differential diagnosis from an expert is very important, because one little symptom can mean a whole thing. Like I said, I've had a patient recently who said, my endo's flaring up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, is it your endo? Yeah, I know. I've had it for years. It's this. Go and have a scan. And the bowel was that full, like it was literally backed up. And it was from the bowel, and the pelvic floor was firing off and all kinds of stuff. And I had to show them and go, this is what it is. And they're like, but, I wouldn't have known. I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't have. So we get this a lot. And I know why people get upset when we write things up, like the difference between a Google research and Dr. Google and stuff like that. It annoys the hell out of me just as much as it probably annoys people when we see people are being missed and dismissed too. It annoys the hell out of me. But we can't put all doctors or specialists in the same basket. There's good and bad in every industry. Doesn't matter whether you're a car salesman, whether you're a scientist. There's crap scientists out there. There's crap doctors out there. There's crap everything out there. So this is what you've got to wade through, and sometimes it's hard. But that's why people like myself is here, so that we can guide you in the right direction. If we don't know, we might be able to find someone for you. So it's looking at all that. But there is getting back to the original point, is that there's a big difference between a Google search and proper research, and you have to be really careful, because it can be dangerous.
Yeah, and I guess as well, even if you do stumble across the correct information, you're not likely going to know what to do with that information, which is what, doctors and specialists are for. They know, they're the best equipped people, to look over that information. They know how to use it properly, or utilize that research, or utilize their knowledge base from what they've studied. Whereas not a lot of people, unless you've done a degree like that, will understand what to do. Or even if they think they do, it's not that simple. It's never that simple. As you were saying, a lot of things have overlapping symptoms, or there might be one symptom could be the difference between it being one disease and another disease in terms of diagnosis. And it's attention to detail that, people like yourself, you're trained to, look for those little tiny things. So, and I think another thing, as you were mentioning, it's not to discourage people from educating themselves. By all means, go ahead and Google some things, but confirm what you've read with a specialist or a doctor. Go over it, let them know, hey, I've got these symptoms. I think it's this. Can we look into this? Because that's how, most people do things. They go, oh, I'm not feeling too good. They go see a doctor, but what you're doing is you're getting all these symptoms and then Googling, oh, how can I do this myself? That's when the problems are likely to start. And the longer and longer you leave it, the worse your condition's likely to get, depending on what it is.
And this is the problem, because the thing is, say, for instance, something like endometriosis or even adenomyosis, the longer you leave it, the worse it can get. It can create adhesions and stuff like that. Sure, those sort of diseases won't kill you, or they, like they could. You could end up with a compacted bowel and an exploded bowel, all kinds of stuff. Sure, but it can ruin your life, and the longer you leave it, the worse, the harder it is to treat. So the sooner you get onto stuff, early intervention's the key. If your doctor, when we talk about doctor, like your GP isn't listening, just say to them, look, can you give me a referral to see a specialist, because I think I've got this and it requires a specialist. If they say no, then go and see someone else, or go to the practice manager and say, look, I'd like to speak to the practice manager, please. I need to speak to someone else because I don't think I'm being listened to. And you don't have to be nasty or anything like that. And then see someone. If someone's Googling your symptoms, then I'm worried. But the other part is, imagine if you Googled your symptoms and you did have cancer, because that's the long and short of it. And again, early intervention of cancer is really, really important. So, the sooner that it's got onto you, that's what saves lives, is early intervention. So this is what we're trying to say to people, is that, you try and do all the things you can at home. You can do your diet and exercise and all that kind of stuff. But even then, if you've got the wrong advice, you could be making yourself worse, because some food groups could flare you. Like me, I can't eat legumes. I can't eat oats. I'll be on the floor in pain, and I'm pretty sure Julia's the same. It's a gene thing. And it's the same thing as about asking questions. And what I would ask from someone is, what was your mother like? What's your sister? And a lot of times you find stuff from family history too that often has been missed. So, oh yeah, mum's got endometriosis, mum's got oh, my sister's just been diagnosed with this. They're all big red flags, like ding, ding, ding. And unless you know the questions to ask, you're not going to find these stuff. And you can't Google this stuff. You just can't.
No, so, I think another thing to talk about in terms of Googling is potentially that element of confirmation bias as well, where a lot of people, or, in layman's terms, cherry picking, I've been guilty of it before. For an example, there was one time where I was trying to look into how plastic pollution affected different things. And I was looking for specific answers I wanted an answer that suited what I wanted, rather than looking at all of the information as a whole. So it was balanced, that my research was balanced. I was just cherry picking what I wanted, but that's not a good habit to get into. And I can understand how people easily get sucked into that rabbit hole when they're looking, looking up things about their health conditions. They're going, for example, does X cause endometriosis? And they scroll through pages and pages and pages until they find that this one thing that they might suspect is, causing their endo flare-ups, to say that, there's a likely cause, when 9,000 other articles that they've scrolled through on Google have said the opposite. So if you're cherry picking information, that's also dangerous as well. And it's easy to do when you're feeling scared about something, going, oh my goodness, do I have this condition? And, you're looking into things, and, it's an easy trap to fall into. But confirmation bias is not a good practice to get into. I know, especially as scientists, we're discouraged from looking for what we want to find very early on. We're supposed to follow the data, the research, what's actually been said. Yeah, we have to be open to things changing and, you know, confronting our own opinions. We might have a strong opinion on what's, you know, what we think is happening, but if the data shows otherwise, we just have to trust the information we have, providing that the data is, you know, has been, you know, undergone rigorous testing and whatnot. But yeah, there's that other thing, and just it's not, again, not to discourage anyone from searching things or trying to further their information. I know you're a big advocate of educating people. That's a big part of your entire process, is making sure people understand what's going on. Any big buzzwords they don't understand, you're happy to let them know what it is. And even on, like, throughout your Facebook posts, it's all about education. It's not to be used, as we've mentioned, as a tool for people to self-treat. It's there for education, so people can understand and then be prompted to see someone. Because what you might be writing about, they may be thinking, oh, I have X, Y, and Z symptoms, and oh, Dr. Orr is, you know, he's writing all these things and this is helping me manage myself. But as you said, you know, they could have something entirely different. And when they eventually see you, because things don't get better, and it happens a lot, people, you know, treat themselves and then go years later, oh, I'm in so much more pain. They come to you and you go, oh, no, it's not that at all. It's actually this. Yeah, education is important. It's one of the most important things. We talk about that all the time. It's just making sure you know where to source your information from, and know that sometimes you don't have all the answers to all your questions. You know, it's not to put anyone down or put any doctors on a pedestal. It's just to say, hey, you know, there are people that have done training for this for years and years and years. I think it's more likely that they're going to know what they're talking about than you, based off, you know, a 2-minute quick Google search. And it's okay to admit that. I wouldn't go, you know, tell you how to do your job, for an example. I wouldn't be going, oh, you should be doing this, 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 and this, because I don't have that training. And just like you wouldn't be turning around to me going, oh, I don't think X, Y, and Z is right about these environmental studies or whatever. You know, you haven't done that training. It's just knowing what we know and what we don't know, and then trying to further our knowledge by seeing the right people.
And that's the other part too that you just touched on, is that even with me, some people come to see me and they spend an hour and a half with their initial consult, and I give them all the information, and then some don't come back, right? And they think they can take that information away and go off and treat themselves. They can't. They can't get all the help they needed. They can't get surgery. They can't get medications. They can't get all the things, do all the things they need to do, but often think they can, or they'll only do little bits of it. And then they'll come back and, or say to their friend, oh, you know, I went and did this, but it didn't work. And it's not that it didn't work. It's that they only did a small part of it, and they were the ones that didn't work. Or the other part is with research is, as you all know, unless you're at a university or you've got a paid subscription, most current data and current research is paid. It's through journals and stuff like you actually have to pay for that data.
Yeah.
And the general public won't be up, like it's hundreds of dollars a year to just for one subscription to one journal. So to be over all the journals, it would cost you a lot of money. So this is part of university degrees and stuff like that. So your healthcare provider has access to those, and a lot of people like myself, even though I'm not at university anymore, we've got lifetime access to those university papers and research that people don't have, just like you would have. So it's all that too. And, you know, any data that's over 5 years old, pretty much it's obsolete.
Oh, yeah, we get penalized at uni for using citing journals that are over, you know, a certain age. So I think they discourage us from, I guess, using anything over 5 years old. Yeah, you've just got to be look at that too, because some data can be outdated, as you were saying. Yeah, so you've got to be careful with that sort of thing too. And as I guess you were mentioning before, people going home and using the information you've had as well, just to touch on that point. I guess what I've seen as well, as much as a lot of the things that they do, the take-home messages they do get from you in terms of diet and lifestyle and whatnot, there are cases where, you know, people often get that wrong. So in terms of diet and lifestyle, what they go home with the information they have, they think they're doing something correctly. They come back to you and show them, you know, you have a look through what they've been eating, and it's not actually as great as they think. And a lot of these modifications, you know, to be fair, are quite different to what people are used to in terms of the, you know, average Western diet. So yeah, that's why guidance is always helpful. That's why, you know, as you were mentioning, coming back after that initial consultation is important, making sure that you're on the right track. You know, you've got to do the same thing with your specialists, with your conditions. I've got to do the same thing with mine. Yeah, it's just, if you've got to look after yourself in that way, make sure you're doing the right thing. Because I might think I'm doing the right thing, but, you know, I've gone back to doctors before and they've gone, actually, not quite right. Why don't we try this time?
Exactly.
And even then, like if my symptoms changed or people's symptoms changed in a matter of weeks, you know, the treatment plan might need to be updated. Which is why it's important to check in after that initial consultation. It doesn't have to all be on your shoulders to fix everything, because a lot of the time, you know, I'm not equipped to do that myself, you know, and a lot of people aren't either. So, yeah.
No, and it's like a car. You're going to have to book a car in at least a couple of times a year for tyres, for service, grease and oil change, all that kind of check the water, all that. You can't not do that. It's the same with your body, and you need to see someone. And I tell people I've had 8 surgeries. So those last seven ones I thought that's all I could have. And just by coincidence, I ended up getting a second opinion with another colleague because I couldn't get in to see my specialist. And it was a blessing in disguise, because the specialist I saw said, yep, I know exactly what this needs. Oh, you know what? I can't do it, but I can refer to you to someone that's all they do. They do this procedure, and it's like the endo. We say, you know, they've got to have an advanced trained surgeon with, you know, like a top tier surgeon, and have it done properly. And that's what I got. And then I can go back to what I'm going to do now is get managed by the original ENT who referred me to this new one, the new surgeon, because he looked after me. He said, I can't do it. It's out of my scope of practice. I could do it, but I don't do it. He does it. That's all he does. So it's the value of a second opinion is really important. And sure, you don't want to tell everyone your symptoms again and all that kind of stuff. But I tell you what, it could mean the difference between having pain, not having pain. And the other part is that even though you've researched, as I say, or search, Google search.
Google search, yeah.
Google search. You've got to be careful too. The one thing I will say to people before we wrap this up is that if you go into a brand new specialist, say you came to me, and I see it happening all the time. Some people come in, they're quite aggressive. They're on the phone, they're very aggressive. They're adamant that it has to be done and someone's not looked after them for. So I'm going to blame every doctor, every specialist. And then what that does, it actually gives you a bad name, because in some of the systems, like the public system, that they'll put a red flag against your name saying she's a troublemaker, she blah, 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 when really all that person is in pain, is sick of being run around, blah, 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 which I can understand. And why you
and it's quite unfortunate too, because they end up not often, you know, getting the help they need because people are shutting their doors. It's actually quite unfortunate. We see it a lot of people going, you know, no one will see me. And it's really sad, because at the end of the day, they're not getting the help they need from qualified professionals.
That's right. And that's where it's sometimes that I can look past and go, look, I know you're angry and I can see where you're at, but look, don't take it out on me and I'll help you. And then when I rewrite stuff to another professional and I write it from me and say, look, so-and-so's been through a hard time. They're not listening to her. You know, she's not a pain in the behind, or he's not a pain in the behind. Can you please help them? They get a whole different outcome. So this is why, again, seeing someone rather than trying to go in and manage it yourself and have someone advocate for you can be a whole different story.
Yeah, you've got to find someone that will, you know, stick up for you and go, you know, no, we're not going to turn you away. We're going to get you the help you need. You just got to work with us. And a lot of the time they do. They get the best outcomes and they go, oh my gosh, I'm actually feeling better.
That's exactly right. It's just changing your attitude a little bit. As much as you can be pissed off, and rightfully so most of the time, but you just have to be careful, because even the best people might shut you down going, oh God, no, this person's really full on. They're trying to blame me, and they're coming in throwing stuff in my face saying, I've got this. And they could, but it goes both ways. We see people damning the doctors, but at the same time, you've got to have a little bit of give and take. And that's what it's all about, and working with someone. All right, I just wanted to come on and talk to you today about this really important subject about the search and versus research. And hopefully you've learned a little bit from it, and you can see where we're coming from, and it's not putting you down or whatever, anything like that when we talk about this. It's actually valid points, and it takes a long, long, long time to learn proper research. And there's nothing wrong with searching your condition, but just don't try and manage it on your own. All right, thanks for coming on and explaining things about research, Julia. And
that's all right.
Thanks, everyone. And hopefully you enjoy hearing this. Talk to you soon.